It was exactly 4 a.m. when I was torn from a restless sleep, screaming as if my chest were about to shatter. The sound of my own voice echoed off the bedroom walls, but the relief of being awake took its time to find me. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding as if it were trying to escape the prison that was my body. It was a nightmare, but not just an ordinary one. It was a manifestation of pure terror that felt too real to ignore. In the dream, I was trapped in a dark canyon, surrounded by shadows, twisting and murmuring incomprehensible words. Amidst that chaos, a creature emerged, one that seemed to have crawled out of humanity's deepest nightmares. It was short in stature, but that didn't diminish its menacing presence. Its grotesque, misshapen body pulsated as if it were alive in a way it shouldn't be. The arms were far too long for its size, ending in claws that glinted like sharp blades, each one reflecting light with a threatening gleam, like swords stained with dried blood. Its eyes, oh, those eyes. They were mere slits emanating a red glow, a red that seemed to pierce into the soul, extracting every trace of hope. The teeth were no less horrifying, long twisted like horns, sharp as the knives of a cruel assassin. They jutted unnaturally from its mouth. Each time it smiled, the air around me seemed to freeze, as if the world itself recoiled from the pure evil that the creature exuded. In the dream, I was a helpless spectator, forced to watch as the creature hunted down and destroyed everyone I knew and loved. There was no haste in its movements. Every step, every gesture was calculated to maximize pain and horror. It tore them apart with its claws, ripping screams from their throats that echoed like a macabre symphony. But before each attack, it looked at me. Those red eyes locked onto mine, and I felt as if it were blaming me, as if my very existence were the reason for its carnage. Then it would laugh, a guttural, distorted sound that seemed to come from every corner of the dream at once. It was a sound that made me want to tear my ears off, but I couldn't move, couldn't even look away. I remember clearly the moment it revealed how it had entered. "They invited me," it said, with a voice that sounded like a chorus of whispers and screams intertwined. And then, it tore my mother's heart out, holding it like a trophy as blood dripped from its claws. My scream was silenced by the agony of witnessing that. It couldn't enter without an invitation, but somehow it had tricked someone into letting it in it. The guilt crushed me. I knew I should have protected my family. I was in my room, my familiar room, my bed, my belongings, everything in its place. But the relief was fleeting. My heart was still racing, and my hands kept trembling. I looked at the clock, 4 a.m. The room was steeped in shadowy silence, except for the sound of my pounding heart in my ears. That's when I heard it. A knock at the door. 1, 2, 3 times, each louder than the last. My body froze. My instinct told me not to move, but my mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was just a neighbor, or someone who needed help. Then I heard a voice. "Tommy, I heard you screaming. Are you okay?" It was my mother's voice. Familiar, caring, full of concern. My body relaxed for a moment. It was just her, my mother. Everything was fine. "I'm fine, Mom. It was just a nightmare," I replied, my voice trembling slightly but full of relief. "All right, dear. I brought you a glass of water. Do you want it?" she asked, her voice soft and soothing. Out of reflex, I almost said, "Sure, come in." But before the words fully left my mouth, something clicked in my mind like a lightning strike. I wasn't home. The family vacation had ended weeks ago. I had said goodbye to my parents and returned to my apartment in another city. They weren't here. No one should be here. Slowly, I got up from my bed and made my way to the closet, each step as heavy as if I were walking through quicksand. I stepped inside and closed the door, trying to control my breathing. My whole body trembled as I held my hand over my mouth to stifle any sound. Outside, the knocks continued, and then something worse happened. The sound changed. They were no longer knocks but scratches, claws scraping against the wood, exactly like in my dream. A shiver ran down my spine as I curled up in the back of the closet, trying to convince myself this couldn't be real. But the sound of the claws persisted, growing louder, drawing closer. The creature opened the closet door. It was horrible, worse than in my dream. When it raised its sharp claws to rip through my neck, I woke up. I woke up again, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, and with my heart pounding in my chest as if it wanted to explode. My eyes darted around the room, and there it was, my clock, glowing a faint red in the dark. 4 a.m. For a moment, everything seemed calm. The room was silent, except for the muffled sound of my breathing. The bed, the closet, the window, everything was in its place. But I knew what was coming. I just had this feeling, like I had been through this countless times before. I just knew. I got out of bed, trying to ignore the incessant buzzing in my head. A low, distant sound, as if it came from the depths of an abyss. I walked to the mirror in the corner of the room. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. My eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. My skin was pale, almost translucent, as if all life had been drained from me. This can't be real, I murmured to myself, but my voice sounded strange, distorted, as if it was being filtered through water. Before I could think further, the familiar sound came again. 3 knocks on the door. 1, 2, 3, each louder, each reverberating in the back of my skull. I turned slowly, my body trembling like a leaf in the wind. I knew exactly what would happen next, but it felt as if I couldn't stop it. It was inevitable, like a play scripted to repeat endlessly. "Tommy, dear, are you okay?" It was my mother's voice again, sweet, concerned, filled with a warmth that made me want to believe. But I knew she wasn't here. She couldn't be. "Go away," I shouted, my voice more a desperate plea than a command. But the voice on the other side changed. The sweet tone turned into something cold, something cruel. "You'll never escape, Tommy. You invited me, remember?" My mind flooded with fragmented memories. One night, I was playing with things I shouldn't have. Candles, symbols, words I didn't understand. A pact made in ignorance. A pact made in ignorance. The knocking stopped, replaced by scratching. Claws against the wood, exactly like in the dream. A sound that seemed to tear not just the door, but my sanity. "It's not real, it's not real," I repeated to myself, rocking back and forth like a child lost in the dark. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. The silence was so abrupt it felt deafening. Relief almost made me cry, until I heard the voice again. This time, it wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the closet. "Tommy." Slowly, I turned my head toward the closet. The door was slightly ajar, and a red light shone from within, pulsing like a heartbeat. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body wouldn't obey. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward it, as if I were a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. When I opened the door completely, I was pulled inside by hands that felt like living shadows. I was thrown back into the dark canyon of my dream, surrounded by the same creatures, the same whispers. And there it was, the red-eyed creature, with that twisted grin that made my soul shrink. "You thought you could escape?" it asked as it approached slowly. "You belong to me now, and I'll never let you go." It raised its claws, ready to end me once again. I screamed, a scream so deep and primal it felt like it tore through my throat. And then I woke up, again, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, and with my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at the clock. 4 a.m. "There's no escape," a voice whispered in my ear. I looked around, but no one was there. My own reflection in the mirror now smiled at me, its eyes glowing red. I was trapped, an endless loop. Wake up, live the nightmare, die, and start again. The only constant was the clock, always showing 4 a.m., always dragging me back into the same terror, the same despair. I sat on the bed, waiting, because deep down, I knew it didn't matter what I did. He would come again. The knocking would start, and I would be dragged back into my personal hell. And so the knocking began. 1, 2, 3. I heard its laughter and looked at the clock. It was 4:01 a.m. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.